I would say that the only thing that frustrates me more than seeing a movie that isn't good is seeing a movie that's almost good and then backtracks on its possible greatness and then fails. And then the only thing I hate more than that is a movie that starts getting good and then backtracks on its possible greatness and fails, and it's about something I really like. And that's the latest Tomb Raider movie.
Can't be too careful these days. The world has gone bloody mad.
I'll take 2.
Melinda and I got back from the theater today, and it was just like, what did we just see? Because we almost saw something great, and then it just completely whiffed. I've been following Tomb Raider since 1996 with the original big box PC CD-ROM game. Loved the franchise, loved the Indiana Jones exploration, loved the original story about Lara Croft's search for Atlantis. I thought it was a stellar game, so much so that I actually played it on a low-res scenario. Like, my PC couldn't actually run the game. It was so revolutionary at the time. And so what I did was I found out that if I hit, I think it was F4 or F5, it would go into low res mode, and then I could move around without the game freezing. And then when I needed to see stuff, I would hit F4, F5 again while I was standing still, and the game would show me like a high res image on the monitor, and I could see what I was exploring, and then I would get ready to run, and I'd click down to low res and go running again. And it was a surreal experience, but the game was just that good. Like, that's what sucked me in. I really loved Tomb Raider for that. It was a revolutionary gaming experience. And so then I started collecting them every year. They came out day and day. It was like there was Tomb Raider 1, and then there was Tomb Raider 2, and 3, and 4. And I just kept playing them, as they would come out. I never missed one. Around the late 90s, around the time that I was getting ready to get out of college, Tomb Raider started to get a little tired. And the people at EDOS and Core, they took the opportunity in Tomb Raider 4 to say, maybe we're going to take a break. And so Lara seemingly dies in the collapse of an ancient pyramid while she's trying to escape. So bye-bye Lara Croft. But then they did it's almost like a Lost Levels game called Tomb Raider Chronicles, where she came back, but only in the recollections of her friends. So you got to play more Lara adventures, but they were sort of bookended by people remembering her at her memorial service or whatever it was. Then the Angelina Jolie movie came out in 2001. I wasn't thrilled by the casting because I wanted an actual British actress to play Lara Croft. Well, okay, let me be honest. Honestly, what I really wanted was I wanted Kylie Minogue to play Lara Croft, which I thought was close enough, because I thought she looked the part with, the sharp eyebrows and the sharp jawline and everything like that. I thought she would have been great, especially back in 96, 97. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. We got Angelina Jolie. Now, Angelina Jolie looked the part, but unfortunately, the screenwriting and the directing mischaracterized her, mischaracterized the games, meaning mischaracterized Lara. They were way obsessed with The Matrix. At that point, they were only 2 years off The Matrix, and so suddenly Lara had to wear all black, and they even had the SS skull on her belt buckle for some reason, which is really weird. And the movie was just esoteric, Illuminati, and there wasn't a cohesive adventure there. But we had some hope because we were getting a new game at the end of it all called, at the end of the year in 2001, called Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness. That wasn't a good game either. Their attempt to bring back Lara really didn't work out all that well. It's one of the few Tomb Raider games that took me forever to finish. It was a slog. I think I came back to it with 4-month breaks, trying to beat all the puzzles, and it just wasn't a good game. So then Tomb Raider: The Cradle of Life came out, which was Angelina Jolie's second outing as the character. Better movie, not a great movie. we're talking about a low hurdle to jump here. Okay, it was a better movie than Lara Croft Tomb Raider. That's not a huge accomplishment, but it was showing that the franchise was going to go in the right direction. Unfortunately, nobody came to see the movie, and understandably so. Everybody had been burned by the last film, even though it made good money on hype. No one came to see the next one, and so Lara Croft disappeared into cinematic obscurity. No games, no movies. And then, let's see if I got this right. I believe Tomb Raider Legend was the next big game for Lara. And that was kind of a soft reboot of the character. There was like a mini trilogy. There was Tomb Raider Legend, and then there was Tomb Raider Anniversary, which was a redo of the original Tomb Raider game. It was almost like the original creator of Lara was finally able to make the game he had envisioned in his head in 1996 when he didn't have the graphics and the technology to do it. And then there was Tomb Raider Underworld. All of them are fairly excellent games. Legend and Anniversary, I think, are slightly superior to Underworld. But they're all great games. They all kind of tell their own story, recouching the original story of her search for Atlantis in the middle game, even though that's not the middle chapter. It gets a little weird. It's kind of like Temple of Doom versus Raiders of the Lost Ark. It came out second, but it's actually first. I'm not going to try and iron that out. And then they decided they were going to reboot the whole series. And I'll admit, I was skeptical about them rebooting Tomb Raider. I thought, well, I'm sick of reboots. I'm sick of reimaginings. I don't want to see this. But they did a really good job. I mean, they blew it out of the water. I was blown away by the 2013 Tomb Raider relaunch game. So much so that I actually took the time to write the writer of the game, Rihanna Pratchett, who is the daughter of famous fantasy author Terry Pratchett. And she actually wrote me back, which was really cool. I told her, how exciting it was that Tomb Raider, the main character, Lara, was finally a three-dimensional developed character in these games. Because, the games were so primitive up until that point that you almost had to infer what Lara's character was about. Your brain had to kind of fill in the gaps while you were playing. And they were... The pop culture at large was sort of couching her as this kind of Indiana Jones meets a glamorous female James Bond type thing. She was more someone that like James Bond, that you imposed ideas and ideals on, rather than a character that was fully presented to you. The whole idea of I want to be James Bond, but James Bond as a character can be somewhat hollow throughout most of his legacy. That was the way Lara was until the 2013 game, where they finally said, what would it take for a person to become Lara Croft, and what would that do to a person's personality, which I thought was fascinating. I did miss the fact in the game that they did get away from some of the Indiana Jones stuff. There was less archaeology and hunting down ancient myths, and a lot more Rambo 4, literally Rambo 4 and Lord of the Flies type scenarios. A lot of survival, a lot of suspense, a lot of brutally defending yourself in combat from crazy pirate murderers. Again, very intense. One of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. Felt like I was interacting with a movie for once, and it was better than most of the movies I've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. So I couldn't wait for the next game because it was being done by the same team. And Rise of the Tomb Raider, which came out, I believe, 2 Christmases ago? Yeah, I think it was 2 Christmases ago. Excellent game. Excellent game. I wouldn't say it was superior to the first one, but it didn't take anything away from the first one. I thought it was a really decent game. But it's hard to top the 2013 Tomb Raider. The 2013 Tomb Raider is as good as Tomb Raider / Tomb Raider Anniversary. If I was to play the original Tomb Raider again, I would play the Anniversary version right here. It's stellar. two of my favorite games of all time, Tomb Raider Anniversary / Tomb Raider, and the Tomb Raider 2013 reboot. Excellent games. So, of course, Hollywood comes sniffing around again, and now they want to do this movie with Alicia Vikander. I was really skeptical from the trailer because I thought she's looking more like a robot, like Ex Machina, than she is a human being. Because, see, the thing about the 2013 game is that it's about her going from a college student in archaeology to just becoming this hardened survivor. And they did a brilliant job of mirroring the gamer's experience trying to learn the game throughout the play scenarios, along with Lara as a character suffering and getting stronger, meaning strength of will. And so by the time she gets through the game, she is acting and making different choices, and just overall, it's a different experience. And you as the player are different because you have been playing the game for several hours now, and you know how to do the game. It's actually kind of brilliant. You and Lara grow together, which is awesome. The trailer looked like it was pulling from the tropes of the game, shipwrecked on an island called Yamatai. There are people on the island. They weren't shipwrecked there. They seemed like an organization. And then Lara has to, she falls into a river off of a log, and then she falls onto a Japanese World War II bomber over a waterfall, much like in the reboot game. And then she has to race the bad guys to whatever the evil thing is that she doesn't want them to have. It looked like they were just going to go through the beats, but it looked like there was no emotion behind it and there was no growth. It looked like from the trailer, because of the visuals that they chose, that Alicia Vikander was going to be a badass from moment one to the end. And that's not going to be good, because half the story of the rebooted Tomb Raider is Lara's growth as a character, her arc. I'm pleased to report, well, first of all, before I say this, RetroBlasting is never going to talk about a movie and not talk about things that happen in the movie. And I hate the word spoiler, so this is the only time you're going to hear me say it, because I think it's a whiny, dumb word. We're going to be talking about the movie. If you are somebody who likes to watch non-spoiler reviews, why are you wasting your time? A non-spoiler review of a movie is not a review. It's somebody going, it was pretty good, for 15 minutes. Stop wasting your life. Don't watch those anymore. They're clogging up the internet. Don't watch them. Go see the movie if you're really that desperate to see it, and then watch a review of it that's substantive. Or if you don't care all that much, like I do when it comes to most movies, just watch the review. Because guess what? Not knowing things in a movie and knowing them ahead of time, it's not gonna destroy your world. Okay? So there's your warning. Depending on your level of sensitivity, you've got 5 seconds to stay or go. Okay, so in the film, Lara is, she's trying to make it on her own because her father disappeared and they presume him dead, but she doesn't want to declare him dead, so she hasn't taken over the estate and inherited all the money. But then she gets wind of some evidence that suggests that her father might still be alive on this island of Yamatai off the coast of Asia. And so she's like, well, I got to go there and find him, a la the game. So she gets on this boat called the Endurance, which is also accurate to the game. But none of her friends in the game are with her. She has these friends in the game who she has to protect and save and rescue throughout the video game, which are not here, which is... That didn't bode well. I was like, oh, that could be a problem, because that gives her a focus. That gives her a reason to keep going. She she shipwrecks on the island. She crawls up on the beach just like the game. She gets knocked out just like the game. And then she wakes up not hanging over a crypt in a or a sacrificial area in a cave like she does in the game, which is really freaky, and it really sets the tone for what this game's going to be like, which is the game's awesome. Instead, she wakes up in a tent in this very prepared and provisioned camp, led by this guy named Matthias. Matthias is the name of the main bad guy in the game, but this time his name is Matthias Vogel. Matthias didn't have a last name in the game, and he is part of the Trinity organization, which is sort of like a deep state world puppet thing that tries to capture all of the ancient legends and stuff to secure power throughout all the world's governments and all this kind of stuff. I guess it's kind of similar to Illuminati, but Trinity is in the video games, but Trinity doesn't really have a presence until Rise of the Tomb Raider, the second game. So having Trinity in this first game is really weird, or in this first movie is really weird. So Lara's there. She escapes. They try and, stop her, but then she does the whole game thing. Now at this point in the movie, I'm actually really invested because up until this point, we've seen her working as a bicycle courier in London because she doesn't want to accept her father's fortune. And even though that was a little odd because that's not in the game, at least they were trying to build her character. But when she escapes the camp and runs off, with her hands bound, and then tries to cross the river on the log and falls into the river, a la the trailer, suddenly the movie was really ratcheting up. The movie was reaching for those heights that the game achieved of suspense and true panic that you feel as the player. You get to the moment where she comes rushing down the river, almost goes down the waterfall, and catches the wing of the old World War II bomber that's hanging off the side of the waterfall. And they did a really good job with it. Of course, they had to play with it a little bit because Hollywood can't just play the scene out the way it was played by somebody else. So instead of her actually getting the parachute on at one point, they just have her hold the parachute and open it, which any normal human being, you would have let go of the parachute because it would have come shooting out of your hands and you would have died. But it's Hollywood, so we're going to forgive them that one. And then Matthias sends a guy after her to track her. She falls out of the trees from the parachute, lands on a sharp piece of wood, a la Rambo 3, and then she has to pull it out of her, which is also in the video game. Very cool scene, hard to watch, but that means it's good because you got to remember, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, those adventures are not like Indiana Jones. There's very little to no humor to undercut the stuff that goes on in Tomb Raider, and that's always been the case. There's no yucks. There's no haha. It's a more serious series of adventures, and that's always what's differentiated Tomb Raider from Indiana Jones as far as both being adventure movies or adventure stories. So Lara's hiding out under a rocky outcropping at night in this muddy, swampy area. She hears a noise. She doesn't know what's going on, but she has to go look around because she gets scared. And that tracker comes out, and he's got her around the throat, and he says, "You're coming with me," and they start fighting. Well, it's a really intense fight. It's extremely well done. Like, it's extremely good. And she has to murder him in 3 inches of muddy water by just pressing his head into the mud and drowning him. And, it reminded me not only of the moment in the game where you have to kill somebody for the first time, which was also expertly handled. Different setting, different scenario, slightly different mechanics, but no less emotional. She's crying, she's distraught, but she's desperate to survive. And at that moment, I shouldn't have done this, but at that moment, I looked over at Melinda and I said, "This movie is good." And she goes, "Yeah, this movie's amazing." And at that moment, instantly at that moment, the movie flatlined because she looks up and there's her father. And he's standing at the edge of the swamp and he's looking like Robin Williams when he comes out of Jumanji. Huge beard, all this hair. And so she starts chasing him to try and figure out, "Dad, please stop," and all this kind of stuff. that's the moment where the movie died. Like it didn't become bad, but it lost its crescendo. Everything about it just failed because Tomb Raider, and most video games for that matter, center on a lone character that you're in control of, that you have to see through all of these challenges. It's all up to you. Especially with Lara Croft, it's always all up to her. And that's where the suspense comes from, because it's only one person. She's got to get out of this herself. And they were proving that they could pull it off and make it compelling in this movie. This movie achieved that for 10 minutes. It was some of the best 10 minutes of Lara on screen I've ever seen. Topped everything that was in any of the Angelina Jolie movies. And in Cradle of Life, there are a few things in that movie for classic Lara, that do work. So I'm not trying to take anything away from that too. It was almost a different character back then. But like classic Lara's era, these Tomb Raider movies just can't stick the landing, whatever era they're trying to mimic. So the moment that her dad shows up, suddenly she's got her father there. And her father's literally sewing up her wounds and taking care of her. That's not Lara Croft. That's not Tomb Raider. That's not an Indiana Jones type or anything like that. And speaking of Indiana Jones, the movie then becomes a mimicry of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because you have a moment where he's looking at his scrawled maps in his cave. Matthias's last name is Vogel, Vogel. General Vogel was the Nazi commander in Last Crusade that Indy fights on top of the tank. So then he says to Lara, "What are you doing here?" She says, "I came here to find you because everybody thinks you're dead." He says, "Well, I couldn't get off the island." And then he says, "But, thank goodness that you're here. I'm glad that you burned my stuff because Vogel will never find it." Matthias Vogel will never find it now. And what he's referring to is Lara had found a videotape of him before she left London saying, "If anything happens to me, please burn everything that I've done researching the island of Yamatai and the Japanese Empress Himiko." Well, she didn't do that. She carried it all with her, and then when she washed up on shore, Matthias got the bag, kind of like the Grail diary. And so she says, "Yeah, about me burning your stuff." And he's like, "Wait a minute, you didn't burn my stuff?" And he's like, "So you just brought it here and gave it right to Matthias?" Which, I couldn't help it. The dad chiding the adventuring kid reminded me of, Castle Brunwald in Last Crusade, where he's like, Sean Connery's like, "You think my son would be that stupid? Bring my diary all the way back here?" And then Harrison Ford's like, "Oh," and he's like, "You did." That whole sequence. I was like, wow, somebody really loves Last Crusade, and it's not going to serve this movie well because this movie needs to be what it's set out to be. The last third of the movie is just them unlocking a big door in a mountain, which isn't all that interesting, honestly. And then they walk through these trials. It's like Last Crusade, it's like the breath of God, the word of God, the path of God. Well, this is the faces of something, and then the pit of the dead and something else. And like one of the trials is literally just a big gap in the floor, and they put like a Home Depot ladder over it and they walk across it. I mean, I'm not kidding. Like that's the trial. The next one, she's having to put these colored stones through this light in the door while the floor is falling out from under all of them. But they're all helping her because the bad guys and everybody are all desperate to get to the treasure too. Because of course the bad guys have her at gunpoint, just like Donovan did in Last Crusade. And so they're all helping her, which undercuts the tension. Also makes her a less formidable character. It's really too bad, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because you commit to all of these things about the game. Like, you're not departing completely from the game like the Angelina Jolie movies did. Those movies didn't repeat anything from the games as far as the plot was concerned. But this movie was like, no, this new plot is really good, so we're going to have the island of Yamatai and the Empress Himiko and the Endurance, and we're going to have, Matthias, and we're going to have the survival with the Japanese World War II stuff all over the place and falling into rivers and pulling big, spikes out of your side and, all that stuff that Lara went through. We're going to have that in this movie. But we're only going to have it for 10 minutes. And then after that, we're going to go do something else. And I'm like, well, you were setting up a great movie, and then you left all this stuff on the cutting room floor that would have been cinematically awesome. I mean, there are so many moments in the game that are great. Twice as suspenseful as anything I've just described. 4 times as suspenseful. And you just ditched all that. And, you could say, well, maybe they didn't have the budget to do it. It's like, well, they had the budget to do 1/3 more of a movie or another half of the movie. They could have done a different kind of half. They didn't have to do this bland half that they did. And this is the real thing that just blows my mind. If you remember in the original Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's a bait and switch at the end where Indy has been this guy who always says, I don't believe in magic and a lot of superstitious hocus pocus. And you get to the end of the movie and they open the Ark and they all start laughing at Belloc because there's just sand in the bottom. And Indy starts to laugh too from the post he's tied to. But then it's turnabout because then Indy realizes, oh wait, something's happening. And then the real magic starts to happen. The supernatural forces come out. That's the Tomb Raider reboot game too. She thinks throughout the game that Himiko is just this historical thing that was built up in legend, more than they're just making myths around her at this point in the ancient texts. But then she starts to realize something funny's going on here, something supernatural's going on. And by the end of the game, she encounters the supernatural just like Indiana Jones would, and just like the classic Lara did in a lot of her games. So, in this movie, we find out that Himiko had no supernatural powers and was not locked away anywhere for the safety of the world. She locked herself away because she had a disease. And she didn't want that disease to spread around the world. So they take all of the supernatural fun out of it too, which pulls the rug out from under the movie at the end because the movie was building to a tension, then it stopped and went flat, and then didn't build to anything else by the end. It just became this kind of gunfight in a crypt. And then everything collapses, and Lara's the only one that gets out. I mean, that's it. In fact, it was so predictable from the trailer that when we were headed to the theater, I told Melinda, I said, well, I bet you money that the shot of Alicia Vikander with the 2 guns in the trailer where she says, I'll take 2.
I'll take 2.
These 2 guns right here, where she says, I'll take 2. I said, I bet you that's the last scene in the movie. I bet you that's the last shot and then credits. She's like, you think so? And I said, yeah. I said, because in that scene, you're seeing Alicia Vikander with a braid, which the rebooted Lara doesn't wear a braid. She just has like a ponytail. And she's never used dual guns, except at the climax of the reboot game for 1 second. But otherwise, she doesn't use 2 guns. She's more famous with that Rambo-style bow and arrow at this point. We said, okay. She said, I'll take that bet. We get to the movie. We go through all of it. Gets to the end. Credits start rolling, and the scene wasn't in there. And then suddenly the credits stop, and they have that last little bit. And it's her at the gun store, and she says, I'll take 2, and then the credits rolled. And Melinda gave me a high five, and I was like, yeah, see? I mean, Hollywood doesn't know what to do with Lara. And even though Square Enix, who does the games now, they partnered on this movie, it seems like they, right at the end, were trying to put Lara back in the Angelina Jolie style of the films. She was in a leather jacket and, black leather jacket, like biker jacket with the 2 guns and the braid. And I'm like, wow, they just don't know how to embrace this new version of the character. They're already trying to retcon it back to the old character, who was a cinematic failure. So I know I just ranted for a little bit. I don't mean to. Like I said, that 10 to 15 minutes of the movie was really good. But I'm I'm very devoted to the adventure genre. And so I know a lot about Lara, not to mention Indiana Jones, Alan Quatermain. I was really hopeful that since this game was so good, and since the movie looked like it was going to follow the game, that it would be good too, because a good story is a good story. Now, what I will say is that up until the point that her dad shows up, it was a proof point. It proved to me that a good script can weather a few bad decisions. You know, a good story can shrug off a few bad decisions. Alicia Vikander, not a bad actress. I give her credit for everything she did. She did everything she was asked perfectly. Not quite Lara Croft in, you know, her countenance. Not quite what I had hoped for as far as, you know, just the look, because her face is what sold the new game, the reboot game. All the marketing was her face, and it wasn't even a real face, obviously, because it was a video game character. Camilla Luddington played the voice of Lara in the last 2 games, but her face with the dirt and the cuts and the haunted look, that was the game. And so you get real familiar with that face, because it was, you know, a game that could utilize the technology to finally give you a video game character that you could connect with. And I feel like they should have honored that in 2 ways. 1, by getting an actual British actress, and 2, by getting somebody that looked a little more like Lara right here. But Vikander didn't do a bad job. I mean, she did a great job with what she was given, and she was physically fit for the role. Like, she was clearly athletically trained to do all this. Very convincing. But the film just didn't commit to the direction. It seems like it got scared. I mean, even to the point of bringing her dad back into the game when her dad, or into the movie, when her dad was long dead and lost. That was a big mistake, because the strength of this story, and in all of the Tomb Raider stories, is about Lara's ability to take care of herself and be this self-sufficient, capable, dangerous, smart adventurer. And we did not get that with this new Tomb Raider movie. And if you don't have that with Tomb Raider, you failed. So thanks for listening to me rant, and I'll see you on the next video.